Hello, and again, welcome to TAP2. We're here highlighting women that work with TAP2. They have been amazing. And some of the things that we've done have just been exceptional because of the experts and the women that we have as a part of our team. I am Sonia Toomer-Bates, and I'm the Executive Project Director for TAP2. And we've been doing it for about 5 years. And I really feel that each year we get better and better. We've got an amazing team. I'm telling you, it's second to none. And here I have with me today Sonia Booker. And I'd like her to just share a little bit about herself. She's our focal and our expert on all things real estate, and commercial real estate is one of those areas that she does assist us with. Sonia, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. And listen, thanks for the work that you're doing. I mean, just the vision that you've had around the technical assistance work is just like, it's like no other. And when I hear 5 years, it's like, wow.
Right.
5 years. That's like, because I've only been in this particular role of technical assistance for like 2.
Yeah.
But started working with you on just women's entrepreneurship.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I'm just always proud of the work, and it just gives me really great honor to be around.
Oh,
Impact. Like if it's not impactful,
yes,
I don't want to do it.
That's right. That's right.
So I love that mission. I love the mission you have. So I'm Sonia Booker, and I am a real estate developer, real estate investor, and I can't remember if I turned entrepreneur or if I'm a real estate entrepreneur, because it started where it just started to kind of go hand in hand. So, I grew up in Jackson, Mississippi, around construction, around my grandfather, and they were always in real estate. We were always in real estate. And I just remember, even as a young girl, just kind of wanting to be in control of my own destiny.
Right.
Like that, nobody was saying it's an entrepreneur. Nobody was calling it an entrepreneur.
Right.
It didn't have but it was like all of the things that were listed for me, like nurse, oh, I don't like blood, teacher, oh, I don't have the patience, like all of my list of the 3 or 4 things that I could be,
Right.
especially as a little Black girl,
Right.
in Mississippi. It was kind of a short list. And so I just remember always doing all this different activity with my grandfather, going on his burial policy routes, going into the city selling produce. We call that peddling, and we would go in and, and so, we'd take this, Chevy truck in town, and it's filled with, collard greens, okra, black eyed peas.
Oh, yes.
Right. You know what I mean? Like filled.
Come on now.
And I remember coming back, we'd be gone, in town 3, 4 hours, like half the day, like half the morning, we would leave like 6, 7 in the morning. And we would come back, and he would have this big coffee, can. He would keep money in the coffee can. So he had his wad of money, put in coffee can. And, before he's putting in the coffee can, he's breaking me off, my part.
Old school. That's old school right there.
Like, let me get this right. We left with some greens, and we came back with a different kind of green. Entrepreneur was born.
How about that?
Like we just created some money. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like we went, there was labor involved in, planting the seeds, picking the vegetables, making sure everything was watered and the crops grew properly.
Right.
So you had all of that you had to oversee. And then you load that up and you take it and sell it, and then you get money.
Right.
For that.
Right.
Yeah, that was like the first time that I really was like a click, like
an aha moment.
We created money. We took our hands and we took something and then made something out of it.
Right.
Yeah. And so from there, I was just like, always like, we had this brown Chevy truck. Every time the brown Chevy truck crunk up, I'm like riding shotgun.
We're ready.
We're ready. I'm
ready.
Like, I'm in the passenger seat. And just like, he's like, Sonia, get the ledger out. I'm in the glove compartment. Write this down. Make a note. That's what we sold. That's what we did. And,
awesome.
just kept keeping books.
Wow.
The bookkeeper. And I remember we would go in the city and people started saying like, Mr. Martin, do you have any peas that are already shelled? You know, and I was like, little lazy city people, you know. And but it gave me an idea. And I was like, well, what if I shell the peas? And so he was like, well, if you shell them, if you shell them and bag them, then you could sell them and I'll give you that difference cost. It's like, well, what could I sell that for? It's like $2 more a bag. I was like, oh, I get to keep the $2, you know. And so that $2, I
Mm.
was just like looking for like, how could I take this
You been a mastermind a long time.
to take this to another level? So it was just kind of instilled, and luckily I got to be around it and it got, you know, fostered. And so when I graduated from college and did all the stuff that you thought you do, graduated from the University of Southern Mississippi, and it was like got recruited right out of college, and went and worked for J.C. Penney. And I remember my grandfather saying, don't you have enough experience yet? You know, and I was like, "What are you talking about?" You know,
Right.
and he was like, "No, you're like you're somebody who you're not designed that way."
Right.
Yeah, because he saw that and he like
That's why he
fostered
was
that.
grooming you
And then
from
yeah, it's like
early.
get the ledger, write this down, do this, do that. You know, what you think about that? And it was like really showing me, and it just kind of like stuck, like all those things stuck. And so when I did have my first corporate job, you know, I remember thinking like, I'm not cut out for this. Like, I'm not controlling my own destiny. This does not feel like I'm controlling my destiny. And so after I was working on my master's at the University of Dallas at the time, I was living in Plano, Texas. And I remember, you know, just kind of putting my mind to like, this is not what I had in mind. This feels like a ceiling and it feels very low.
Right.
Yeah,
Yep.
it feels
Yep.
very low,
Yep.
and it didn't allow me to be the free thinker that I was being raised to be, and that I was raised to be. And so I was like, okay, it's time for me to, you know, move on. And I remember at that time, part of my job entailed me coming to Atlanta. I was living in Dallas. I would come to Atlanta to go to the market, the America's Mart. I was a buyer for J.C. Penney. And I remember coming to Atlanta and I was like, oh, that city, like the energy, I always just felt alive when I would come to Atlanta from being from
Opportunity.
the opportunity just felt like,
Opportunity.
whoa. And so I told everybody, you know, I was finishing my master's and I was like, as soon as I graduate, as soon as I finish, I'm moving to Atlanta. You know, everybody's like, what? You know anybody in Atlanta? I'm like, no, I'm moving there. You know, and I remember like the night of my graduation, I didn't even go to my graduation. I had my little Honda packed up and I was like rolling. I moved to Atlanta and everybody's like, you don't know anybody. And it was
But
just like,
that's the part that's so amazing. Your grandfather saw that in you.
yeah,
He instilled that from small, so you couldn't get away
I
from it.
couldn't get away from
You know, it was
it.
part of your DNA
Yeah,
actually at that point.
yeah.
And so when you were able, and even with his tip of saying, you're not ready yet?
Mm-hmm.
You ready yet?
Mm-hmm.
You know, because there's a work that you have to do that's way
Yeah,
beyond.
that's way beyond.
You know, we always talk, you and I often say, you know, whatever project we're working on, whatever we're doing for the community, whatever we're doing for with the women serving in such a capacity, it's bigger than us.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
just bigger than us. And you can't box
And
that
you
in.
can't box it. It doesn't flourish. It doesn't feel good. And I remember when I packed up my car and I moved, um, I, you know, was like looking, I figured I've had these points, like probably 3 points in my life, and I don't know. I was just really blessed to figure to know, to be intuitive enough to understand where I was. So when I moved to Atlanta, everybody was like, "What are you gonna do?" And I said, "It's time for me to be an entrepreneur," but I didn't know what entrepreneurial. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like I was just like, I'm not going back for a
Yeah.
job. Like,
Right.
you know, I was just
Right.
like, it's time for me to do something. And I almost think the idea of not really knowing, like I never just knew what kind of entrepreneur. I was just like, I want to start a business. I want to have my business. And so, but I knew also that I was in a place where I took off for like 3, 4 months, that I just wanted to just explore
Mm.
and get to know myself, in a different phase and like kind of sit with myself, like, what does this next look like for you? And I, and just to think like, I just was like, I'm not going to work anywhere. I'm just going to drive around 285, figure out, Atlanta. And, I would go over to Piedmont Park and take my blanket and camp out and just sit. And it was just like, and I remember about 3 months into that sitting, like, girl, you got to do something. Like, you got your savings, like, like,
About to get empty.
about to get empty. Like, and I remember having the classified ad out and, laying in the park and I had the newspapers before Indeed and, LinkedIn. And so I got the newspaper and I'm looking at the classified and I see this position for a real estate life insurance coordinator. And, my sometimes I could be like extremely like naive about stuff, which is sometimes good and sometimes it's
Because
like,
you'll take that leap.
because I'll take the leap.
You'll
Like,
take the leap.
well, I used to go on my grandfather's burial policy route. Like, surely
I
I
could
could
do
probably
this.
do.
What? What?
That's how I ended up in the insurance field of like, yeah, I could figure this out, life insurance. And so my first venture was, starting as a life insurance coordinator for Allstate, and then quickly like having to go to the different agent offices and help them to get more life insurance. And then I would have to travel to Illinois, where the corporate office was, to like go in there and just like get stuff from being unstuck. It could take somebody like, 10 weeks to issue a life insurance policy because you had all these like processes and stuff was just getting stuck.
Right.
So it's like,
Right.
Sonia, go to, Illinois and, and I was like this coordinator liaison. And that was horrible. I realized then I knew processes, but
Mm.
I didn't like the snow in Bloomfield in Illinois. Like it's like this is too cold. This is too
New
crazy.
York wouldn't have been your friend either.
I mean, I am not cut out for it. I remember parking, having a rental car, parking, and then going back looking for the car, and it was snowed in. And I was like, like people like digging out car. I was like, is there a cab? Like, I don't know about this life. And so yeah, so I ended up doing that. And then, but once I got the gist of it, I was like, the agents, that's where everything happens because there's no life insurance, there's no claims adjust, there's nothing else needed, underwriting, nothing until somebody writes a policy. So everything starts at, the agent level. And so it's always kind of like looking at that and like, okay, so I need to be an agent. Again,
Right.
sounded so simple at
Right.
3 years old that I need to be an agent because that's where, everything was happening. And I kind of set the course and all the powers that be, everybody just thought I was crazy. Like, who is this little girl talking about? She wants to be an agent. And so they gave me the criteria I needed and I became an agent. It wasn't like overnight. That's a whole story. But by 24, I was the youngest agent in the Allstate community.
Wow.
And after suffering and having a rough 18 months getting started eating peanut butter and jelly, I became top agent in the state of Georgia for 3 years in a row.
That's exceptional.
Yeah.
Even at your age. But you were like, let me say, you were designed for this. You were
I just figure stuff out.
ordained for
Yeah.
this. That's why there was no fear.
Well, it seems so simple that I could probably do that. I always tell people because even now when I teach and work with a lot of entrepreneurs, I'm like, hey, look, I'm always scared. Like, I know I look confident sometimes. I'm like usually shaking in my boots, but doing it anyway because I know the consequence. My grandmother used to say, don't have the regret of not doing it. And it's kind of like, what's the worst thing that could happen? I fell. I fell fast. I fell forward. Like it was just kind of like, what would happen if I didn't try that though? That I didn't want to live with. That was kind
Right.
of like, yeah, no, I
Yep.
don't want to do that.
But I think that's so important that you speak about because they see Sonia Booker now and they don't realize what you've been through and really what you bring to the table.
Mm.
That's why I think it's so powerful for someone to work with you, for the ones in the community to
Yeah.
even have an opportunity for you to map out plans and ideas around an area that they are exploring, ready to move forward with. But you like almost have every angle outlined. You already seen it, done it, been it,
Yeah.
you know. But that's what's so key to
Well,
what
but
you
listen, this is
do.
how, and so this is where my first real estate started. Like, obviously I was born, in it with my grandfather. Moving to Atlanta, I went to one of the agent's offices, and I'll never forget it. I'm like in there talking to him, and he's in Forest Park, which is so interesting because I do stuff in Forest Park now, and it was just kind of like this full circle. But I'm going in his office, and we're like, we're just talking about his life insurance, but then I'm just asking questions. And he's like, yeah, I own the whole plaza. I was like, come again? He's like, yeah, I own the plaza. So he had like H&R Block as a tenant. He had Papa John's on the end, like all that. I was like, so hmm, you're making more money in the real estate
Oh, how about
than
that?
being an agent.
Right.
And it was like, yeah,
Another
basically.
step.
And I am kind of here like rent free, like this building is being paid for. My office is out of it. And then I'm like doing my business. And I was like, oh, I like that.
Right.
Like that model that like that really clicked. And that was like my first kind of introduction to like, how do you use real estate and do business? Like where it became bold. And so now, and of course, we can't skip over the fact that I had the blessing to be able to meet and be mentored by the late Herman J. Russell
Oh, yes.
Sr. And, whenever I come
Very
into
key.
this
Very key.
building, this Rice Center that I always call Russell Center because it's like, that's the namesake and that's like who I met. And I remember reading about him in Black Enterprise as a real estate pioneer.
Mhm.
And it was again that just kind of starry eyed. I was like, I got to meet him. Like, I got to meet him. Like, is he in Atlanta?
Mhm.
Like I'm in Atlanta, he's in Atlanta. It seemed quite simple, but it took me 2 years to meet him, and just to my meeting was just to be able to say, "Hey, I'm here. Can I have your cell phone number? Can I call you from time to time as I'm doing deals and if I need some advice?" And that was my goal because as I was coming from Mississippi, like I've seen things, and I grew up most of my life hearing about Emmett Till and where you don't go, and you don't go down these certain streets, and you don't do this, you don't do that. And so my perspective about racism and civil rights and all of that was like ground zero.
Right. Yeah.
It's
Oh,
like
yeah.
I was not, not aware of the world and the just kind of the hatred and this just kind of racism that existed. And so I remember just thinking like, wow, how did he build? When I met him, like in 2003, I remember thinking like, how does someone build? His company was about to celebrate a 50th year anniversary when I met him. And it's like, how do you, I mean, you had to start building this in the 50s.
Yeah.
And
What you knew about ground zero.
right, like how
Yeah.
does that happen? And that was my premises of like, I gotta know. I got like, how do you come out with a company like this and at a time like that, And I remember just my first meeting with them. It, obviously, was amazing. And then when he asked to see some of my properties, at that time I had a couple duplexes, and I was kind of like, you want to see my stuff? Like, like you're you, and you want to go, yeah.
But
And
do you think, as we get ready to close this out, do you think all that you have with the mentors you've had in your life, and I consider your grandfather a mentor as well.
absolutely, my
You,
first.
as we close this out, for the work that you do with TAP2, for the customers that you work with, for being a woman entrepreneur for this year, and being up under Russell, like you,
Mhm,
I mean, just
mhm,
that's a testimony. Like that's a whole nother podcast.
mhm.
What do you think this year, from everything you want to do as a woman, would be your goal? And that we can really kind of tailor for those who see who
I
Sonia
think
Booker
that's
is.
good. And so I feel like when you look at my tab 2 work and the real estate work that I do with the entrepreneurs, it comes from this space of like, I'm not telling you what I heard about,
Right. Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
what I know and
Yes.
like why you have to plan this out, why you have to understand what you need for what you're doing. And so for this year, when I look at it, I look at the one thing about my mentor, the late Herman Russell, is I always tell people he gave me 15 minutes of his time that
Mm-hmm.
turned into a 12-year mentorship.
Mm-hmm.
And I cannot even imagine my life without that 15 minutes had he not taken that time out.
Right.
So it's always like, who am I not to give my time, not to take
Wow.
out that?
Right.
And so that's what I always want women in particular, because I know we're just different, and
Mm.
I recognize that, and I always want women to feel that I am here for them. I mean, my guys are my guys, just like, but the women, I want women to know, like, I got you, I
Yes.
am here for
Yes.
you. And
Yes.
I feel my work in 2024 is really around that, that premises that women have that safe space, they have that place where they could go to, where they could reach someone, reach out, like, this is what's going on in my business, this is what I'm thinking, what I need, and I could be that for other people.
Exceptional.
Yeah.
Sonia Booker, thank you for your time. Thank you for your expertise and everything you bring, not only to TAP2, but you are a force to be reckoned with.
Oh,
Absolutely, absolutely. And we're just glad to have you on our team.
yeah.
And we appreciate you guys tuning in. We have more. Reach out to us on TAP2, connect in. We're looking forward to it. Thanks again, Sonia.
Thank you.